Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Today it gives us great pleasure to share with you our education transformation proposals. We are not here by chance. We are here because we want to share with you what a future for our children could look like. As the minister said, and as she quoted John Dewey, if we teach our children today as we were taught yesterday, we rob our children, I'm going to add, of a bright tomorrow. We can no longer prepare our children for 60 years ago. And while there are elements of the education system that we can hold on to, there are other elements that when we deconstruct, when we pull apart and we examine, we recognize they're not preparing our children for the bright future. And that's the reason that we engaged in consultation. Dr. Denny, thousands of people.
Yes.
We spoke with to find out what are your views on this reimagined education system. What do you want to see as we move forward? We asked the child, the little primary school child. We asked the teacher. We asked the principals. We asked faith-based organization. We asked private sector. We asked the third sector.
Yeah.
Dr. Denny, who else we asked? We asked everybody. What does a reimagined education system look like? And we sat together and we came up with some ideas. We reimagined. We dreamt. We thought about what we wanted to see. And we said, through it all, we want to give every child a fighting chance at a bright future. We said we want to teach each child in the way that he or she learns best. We said we want to inspire all our children to excel and to achieve. And we said we wanted to have an outstanding Bajan citizen who can compete anywhere in the world and excel. As we thought, we proposed a firm education system, one that is built on a firm foundation. And I know Minister McConney just spoke about that. We have a relatively, as you would say, a relatively good education system, right? That education system mirrors the same education system of 60 years ago. Standards have changed. My grandmother had a ladder. That's a car. Old-time car. I don't see ladders now. They don't even look like ladders. I remember growing up, I had a phone, I had to stick my finger in it, and when I'm calling my friend, dial 4, 2, one of those dial phones. How many of you have seen one of those recently? Young children don't even know what I'm talking about. But yet, when we look at our education system, when we look at what happens in our classroom, the children are sitting in the same rows and columns. Generally, the children are being coached to pass an exam, a screening test that was invented years ago. When a child is talkative, generally we tell the children, but not all teachers, some. Stop talking and hear so much, concentrate on what you're doing. You saw Dominique up here reading. I could tell you, if we put Dominique up here to talk with you, you will be here till 5 o'clock and you would not have heard the proposals.
That's right.
That's why he came out here with a script. Because yesterday, as Dominique was talking about artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and how it could be used to help the children. And he's talked about gamification, and school needs to be more exciting. But he likes school because at school he plays games, and he can see, Dominique can tell you everything. So we said, all right, people have to hear the proposal, so let's give you a little script, Dominique, so that you could, focus. But you saw it there with Ivan Clark. He didn't have a script, and I could tell you that he didn't prepare those questions in that kind of way. We want an education system that will allow our children to be who they are. Firm, that is fair, that is inclusive, that is relevant, and that is modern. In our discussions, I remember very well a child saying, but you have to upgrade the schools. We have to have better bathroom facilities, better infrastructure. Teachers called for curriculum reform, the children too. Some of the children said, well, some of the things that I'm learning in school, I can't see how I could use them in my everyday life. And then in terms of leadership, there were some who said, well, my principal tries, but I realize that there are certain things that my principal, she or he could do a little bit better on. So we need to provide opportunities for principals. We also need to ensure that there's teacher training. The teachers spoke with us at length. They said, well, Erdison Teachers Training College has programs. They have offerings, but they need to expand those offerings. We want to get some credits, some micro-credentials to show that we've done something. They called for modernization of the legislation and the regulations. As it stands, we are governed by legislation written in 1982. So when I talk to my team about open EMIS and utilizing all of this digital technology so that we can see reports in real time and so on, they say, yes, Chief, we with you. But we got to change the legislation because the legislation doesn't talk about that. In 1982, nobody was talking about seeing things real time. So that's one part we need to deconstruct and reconstruct to be relevant in this day. Engagement. We need the communities to be involved. We have schools, and after 3 o'clock, say maybe 4 o'clock, after the extracurricular activities, schools are dead zones. You don't have any kinds of activities for the community, learning basket making, learning how to repair shoes, the old-time Bajan things. You know what I'm talking about? We don't have that. We need to look at that to see how we can better utilize our schools, better get the community involvement, because I can tell you once the community is involved, those schools will thrive. It will go beyond the evening interaction to whole day interaction. Asking the principal, how may I help you? I see a wall here, want painting, how I can help you with that? But if people don't go into the schools, they can't see where they can help. So we need to look at the community engagement. We also have to look at that home-school partnership, where the teacher and the student and the principal work hand in hand for the development of the child.
So, what is in all of what we are doing for our students? We want every one of them to have a fighting chance, a bright future. I stood behind the curtain and listened to Minister McConney say she was a poor child from St. Philip. We don't want that because you are a poor child from somewhere in the far recesses of the country that you don't have an opportunity. So we want a chance for every child. And what is in it for our parents? You know how good parents feel when they see their children achieving? That is what we want for parents. Wherever they're from, whatever their station in life, we want them to have the joy of knowing my child is doing well. And what is in it for our educators? Professional fulfillment and increased opportunities for recognition and reward. And what is in it for us as a community and a country? National pride. Knowing that when people hear of Barbadians, they think this is an education system in which the children are well prepared.
So when we think about it, we need to produce an education system that is capable of producing persons with skills that make them adaptable, skills that are transferable. We want these citizens to have character, to be self-confident, to be well-balanced, to be productive, not only to be consumers of technology, but to be creators of technology. We want our people to be problem solvers, to be critical thinkers. What would that mean for our country? It would mean that in the end, because we have what are called distinctive competencies, that our country can be globally competitive. It would mean that the citizens will be equipped with critical skills for lifelong learning, quality livelihoods, and life in the 21st century. But we realize we have a problem. And the problem is that our system, as currently constructed, is not adding value as it should.
So we engaged in a lot of stakeholder consultations in order to come up with proposals that would allow us to do the things that are going to address all of the issues we talked about. The minister mentioned the first set of consultations that we engaged in with that team of people representing the critical stakeholders in education. I must add that we were very robust in our discussions. There were times when we were on different ends of the scale in terms of what we wanted to propose. But at no time did anybody ever say anything that was not in the interest of the children of Barbados. And that is why we were able to come to a consensus, because all of us wanted what was best for our children, our future. Now, in addition to those consultations, you would also know that we held a number of consultations where we looked at reimagining education in Barbados during May and June of this year. And we met with principals, we met with teachers from both public and private schools, we met with children, both primary and secondary children, and those were really a pleasure. I don't know if you know, but the children of Barbados know what they want in an education system. And we met with parents as well. And we were blown away by the things that we were told in these consultations. It was obvious to us that everyone we spoke with was interested in seeing our children succeed. But there were some stories that they told that we recognize this is the critical reason why we have to change this system, why we have to transform this system, because we cannot allow some of these things to continue. I well remember a man who has a Down syndrome child who made some plaintive pleas about having his child's needs addressed. And he complained that he had gone high and low, far and wide, and he had not been able to get any support for his child. That burned me, because Barbados is a signatory to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And one of the rights of those persons is a right to an education to that child's fullest potential. And it was obvious that we were not addressing the needs of that child. When I went home that night, before I went to bed, I said to myself, if this were my child that he was talking about, what would I want? And I remembered a book by an educator called Lisa Delpit, which is called Other People's Children. And Lisa Delpit said, if it is not good enough for your child, it is not good enough for other people's children.
Yeah.
I also remember teachers saying to us after we said to them, we want to have a firm system with the first letter representing fair. And teachers got up and said, how can the system be fair when some of us never get the opportunity to teach a bright child? We have to change that. I remember also a student from Queen's College getting up and being perplexed that there were people who were saying to him he should not be seen in conversation or doing anything with children who were going to St. George Secondary. He was too good to associate with them. And the poor child was perplexed as to why that would be. You understand why we have to transform the system? We have to make it work for every one of our children. But generally speaking, as we had those consultations, there was a theme flowing through. Everybody was in agreement that the system could not go on as it was now. It needed to be transformed. They felt that we needed to have equity. They felt that there were schools who were not getting what they required in order to address the needs of their children. They felt that this could not continue. They felt that we needed to go back to addressing the values and attitudes that we came up with as Barbadian children. They were very concerned about that. Special education, as I gave the example with demand, that was one of the burning themes as well. They felt that we needed to provide for our most vulnerable citizens. When the video was showing with the teacher and the child from the Irving Wilson School, the teacher said, and they were not prepared so that they could get jobs. We need to have transitional programming for children like that. They may not be able to go and operate in highly complex situations, but surely there are things that they can do, and we can introduce them to and develop the skills for doing these things in school, in transitional programs, so that those children can leave school and achieve a measure of independence. They also felt that the infrastructure needed to be addressed. The literature tells us that infrastructure has an impact on the achievement of children and the satisfaction of teachers. A lot of our teachers said that the infrastructure was popped down. And when you have to go to work every day in a pop-down situation, that can be demoralizing. So we need to make sure that we provide infrastructure in which teachers can do their jobs comfortably and in which children can learn well. They also talked about leadership, and they were not silent on this at all. They said that some of the leadership in Barbadian schools needed to be improved. They were very clear about that. Even the principals themselves said that. Teachers said that. So we recognize that if we are going to transform this system, that we have to equip the persons who are leading that transformation on the ground with the kind of skills that they can make the decisions they have to make in order to make the system what it should be. Every time you have a problem as a principal, you can't call the ministry and ask them what to do. So we need to equip our leaders. And of course, they spoke to the legislation, and I won't go back through that again. The chief just very eloquently represented that. We must have legislation that is in sync with the world that we are operating in right now. And the last thing of critical note that people said to us was that, yes, we need to have change, but we don't want everything thrown in there at the same time. We want incremental change. We want, if we see that we are making mistakes, that we can wheel and come again. So make sure that the change is incremental.
Thank you, Dr. Denny. We also engaged in situation analysis. We recognize that the world has changed. We need to provide an environment where students are well equipped with the skills to learn and earn and compete. We recognize that the future of work is evolving. We recognize also that there's a need to improve students' outcomes and to further analyze and provide opportunities with regard to the quality of leadership and instruction. We recognize also that there is disengagement and indiscipline. We recognize that there's outdated infrastructure, there's outdated legislation, there's a lack, in many instances, of social and emotional learning. So there are many things we can do to remedy that. But through it all, we recognize that there needs to be a strong focus on certain elements.
Mastery of competencies, social and emotional learning targets. You know, our children now seem to be devoid of any emotions. And we see that demonstrated in the videos that we see with the fights going on, especially, and I'm sorry to have to say this, but especially among our females. So therefore, there has to be a strong focus in everything we do on developing social and emotional targets. We must have performance standards for each level. We can no longer continue to judge this system on how many children pass for X or Y school. We must be looking at how many of our children mastered the curriculum at the particular level. And of course, we need to have a strong focus on global citizenship. We are not only preparing these children to operate in Barbados, but across the wider world.
So how are we going to approach this transformation? We know that the Ministry of Education can't do it alone. So we are going to approach the transformation in the same way that we are approaching the consultations. We'll make sure that we relate, interact, communicate with government. When it comes to national training institutions, we will speak with them as well. Principals, teachers, parent-teachers associations, those persons will be consulted there. Parents, guardians, and the community, and also non-governmental organizations. What really matters now, though, are 4 things so far. 1, that there must be quality education within our schools. 2, that there must be a bright future for every child. 3, that there must be a firm system, one that is fair, inclusive, relevant, and modern. And that 4, we transform our minds, we renew our minds to recognize that every school can be a good school. We will now share with you some of the proposed key changes to the education system. And I want you to hear the word propose. It is only a proposal, okay? We will continue to engage with our partners to hear their input and to incorporate their input as well. So take a listen. Dr. Denny, over to you.
Thank you, Chief. We are looking at these key proposals at 3 levels, at the pre-primary level, at the primary level, and at the secondary level. As the minister pointed out, we recognize that we must do things at the tertiary level, and particularly in adult education, but we are focusing now on basic education. So, at the pre-primary level, we want to introduce universal pre-primary education within the next 3 years. That is, we want all 3 to 5-year-olds in school. I don't know how many of you know, but right now, pre-primary education is not compulsory. And we do not provide enough places right now that every child between 3 and 5 can go to school. For those who are not fortunate enough to get into one of the public institutions, their parents, and some parents choose to send their children to private entities, but there are a number of children out there still who have no access to pre-primary education. Now that shows up when they come in at 5, which is compulsory, and they have not developed some of the prerequisite skills you need for learning. So we want to take away the disadvantage that those children are suffering by providing universal pre-primary education. We also want to make sure that at the pre-primary level there is an emphasis on the play-based curriculum. This is what should be happening at pre-primary school. Sometimes I go places and I see the people are keeping small little children and they have them writing. And the poor children, because their fine motor skills are not developed, they can't get it done. And you would see people lashing them over the knuckles. Come, write it properly. They can't do that yet. They are able to develop those skills in a play-based curriculum. So we want to ensure that all of the people who are delivering pre-primary education understand the critical importance of that play-based curriculum. We also want to introduce universal diagnostic testing at school entry and at various points thereafter. You heard Minister McConney said that she got glasses at 11 years old. She couldn't see the board before. Nobody recognized that before. We must have universal diagnostic testing at school entry because we need to know that if children have challenges, that those challenges can be addressed so that there are not barriers to learning. Minister McConney may have been one of the lucky ones, but I have seen several children whose deficiencies are only identified very late, and by then, they have been left really far behind. So that initial diagnostic testing is critical. We also are living in a world now where we are a global village. So our children have to learn to interact with people who are not speaking the same language. Gone are the days when English takes preeminence. We have to teach our children foreign languages so that they can interact with other people. And the best time to do it is at the pre-primary level because those children are now setting parameters for language development. And if you expose them to 4 languages, they are going to be able to set parameters for all 4. You're talking to them in Spanish now, they respond to you in Spanish. You switch to English, they respond in English. It is amazing how the brain of these young children work that they can set all of these parameters at the same time. So we need to take advantage of that and expose them to the development of functional foreign languages. We need to make sure as well that they develop the social and emotional learning targets. Not that we stand and teach them, this is what you do if you are going to have self-awareness. We infuse them across the various subject areas that the children will be exposed to. And that needs to happen because these are not things that happen by osmosis. They have to be learned. And the more you expose the children, the more they learn. So based on what I said about how we see some of our children behaving now, especially following the long absence from face-to-face school as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to get those social and emotional learning targets in there. And we need to have a system of student profiles. When a child comes in at the beginning of school, the child literally comes tabula rasa. They don't bring anything that we know about them. When we do the diagnostic testing, they're going to be coming with that information, so we know something about them. What we also have to do is add to those profiles, so that when a child leaves one teacher, goes to another. When it leaves one class, goes to another. When it leaves one phase of schooling and goes to another, there is something that is traveling with the child, so that the person who takes up the child next can plan appropriately to address the child's issues or to strengthen the child's strengths and so on.
Dr. Denny, you know that we've started to introduce decoding and robotics in the schools. We're getting our children ready for the formal education, and we will look at retrofitting certain spaces. But the national performance standards, those benchmarks, just tell everybody about that one.
Yes. It is critical that we know what every child should be able to do after that child has completed a phase of schooling. And this is where our focus has to be in the future. Not on how many children pass for X or Y school. It has to be, have the children completed those national performance standards that, having looked at what is happening across the world, having looked at the standards that have been developed by CARICOM, having looked at what we believe our children must know, that we have set, if our children are not meeting those, we need to know. because we need to be able to pivot and turn back to what they have not done well on, or we need to be able to move children along faster because obviously they are developing the benchmarks at a pace that tells us these are exceptional children. Now, at the primary level, we want to have competency-based curricula constructed on 5 skill pillars. What they can do with their hands, their visual, some children are visual learners, their scientific propensity. There are children who like to play and discover, and we must facilitate that. Some children are auditory learners, so we need to put curriculum in place that will allow them to build on that strength. And of course, there's some children like Master Domini who are very linguistic. We need to provide for those as well. If we provide competency-based curricula, building on all of these skill pillars, we are going to be addressing the needs of all of our students because we are addressing the different learning styles.
Dr. Denny, I remembered when we met with the teachers, they talked about the paper pencil tests and the one-shot exams. The continuous assessment was a proposal that came from them as well. Just tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. The agreement we had when we were finished our discussions with the teachers was that we need to have assessment along the way. Assessment that allows us to make changes if things are not working well, rather than having assessment only at the end of the journey. At the end of the journey, you may have some problems that you can't go back and correct. So therefore, we recognize the critical need for continuous assessment so that we can track where children are along the journey and not just at the end of the journey.
We also said that it would be good if we expose our children to the technical and vocational skills, the project-based approaches, and the inclusive approach. But you see, this social and emotional learning targets, we spoke about the critical importance of that, because at that age, we need to ensure that our children are building character.
Yes.
That is something that they carry from this height all the way through to adulthood. So that will be a focus at the pre-primary and primary level.
Yes.
Specialist teachers, Dr. Denny.
Our teachers admitted, or a lot of our primary teachers admitted, that they worked hard, they were good teachers, but some of them were not specialists in maths and English, and therefore they felt that they were shortchanging the children by being generalists. And they made a plea that we look at introducing some specialist positions at the primary level so that we could help to bolster the development of the children in those early stages. And we gave it consideration, and we agreed that, it is something that we can put on the table, because if we can strengthen the development of the children from early, then we are not going to see some of the problems we have. There were 37 children who got 100% in maths at the Common Entrance this year. But there were also 700 who scored below 30%. Many of those children are exposed to teachers who can't teach maths at that basic level. And therefore, we need to put specialists in place so that we can strengthen the early development of those students.
What will help them also, Dr. Denny, is the master teacher track. Remember, we spoke of that, where we have those teachers who demonstrate competencies in numeracy and literacy, helping other teachers across primary school. Yes. We spoke about the digital book scheme, the flexibility in transition age, and that criterion reference assessment, going back to the original purpose of that.
Yes, with reference to the master teacher track, there are teachers who are excellent teachers and who in their hearts, they only want to teach, but like everybody else, they want to earn a higher salary. So therefore, they go into the administrative stream to get more money, but they really want to teach. And we believe that we must facilitate the desire of those teachers because some of them are cut out to be excellent teachers but not good leaders. So therefore, we feel that the introduction of the master teacher track will facilitate the desire of such teachers and will allow us to help some of those schools that are performing poorly. In looking at developing the proposal for the master teacher track, we looked at the performance of primary schools across the country in the common entrance, I think over a 10-year period. There were 5 schools that were in the bottom 5 every year. Those schools could benefit from master teachers coming in there, doing demonstration lessons, doing workshops with the teachers, showing them how to deliver concepts and so on, and helping to increase their confidence in delivering to children. So that is something that we want to put in place as soon as possible, beginning with those schools that have been performing so poorly across a broad period of time.
So we're going to move on now, Dr. Denny, to the secondary, because I know that when we have our consultations over the next 10 weeks, we're going to get lots of ideas and people will get some more meat with regard to what we are thinking collectively about each of these points. But at the secondary level, we're proposing a new way of transferring children from the primary level. At present, there's focus on this exam called the Barbados Secondary School Entrance Examination. You know that exam? Also known as Common Entrance, or the 11 plus. We want to give children the opportunity to transition from the primary school to the secondary school with a profile. So that when that child gets into first form, it doesn't matter where that child is in first form, the teacher can focus on teaching the student more so than teaching the subject. As a result, what are we proposing? The abolition of the 11 plus. That's a proposal. This new system that we are proposing will have feeder schools. And these feeder schools will be primary schools where students from these primary schools will go into a secondary catchment school. If you want to hear more about that, consultations. We're proposing 2 new schools that will lower the teacher-student ratio. We're also looking at ensuring that our teachers can use individualized education plans for those children who are challenged or who need more support, and for those who are exceedingly gifted. We will continue at the secondary level with the technical and vocational skills and reinforcing that. We're also looking at additional forms of certification. Right now, many of our children look to write CXC and CAPE, but we want to make sure that our children have options. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, they have a piece of paper that says, I am competent in numeracy, literacy, a foreign language, I'm a good person, so I did some service learning, I volunteered somewhere, I'm into my health and fitness, so I did some extracurricular activities. So we're proposing something called the Barbados National Secondary Diploma. So that if a child does not leave with the CXCs, that at least they have this diploma that can show that they are competent in certain areas. We're going to update core curricula. Dominique spoke about financial literacy. He wants to learn more about that because he spoke about doing taxes and so on. That was yesterday or today? Anyhow, but he spoke about taxes and so on. So we want to make sure we introduce financial literacy and civics and career guidance. What we are also proposing is a two-tiered structure where we have the Junior College of Excellence and the Senior College of Excellence.
Now, the junior colleges of excellence are going to be equivalent to what is now the lower school in the secondary school system. It is going to typically be having children aged 12 to 14. But we recognize that we have not been doing well at providing for our gifted children, for example. So if we recognize that there are children at the primary level who are gifted and who can move to the Junior College of Excellence before 12 years old, then we are going to allow them to do that. We are also going to put career guidance as part of the program that they are doing. Our schools have guidance counselors now, but they are mainly in areas of psychological counseling and so on. We want our children from very early to begin thinking about what is it that I want to excel in? Where do I want to put my life's energies? And they can do that with career counseling. We are updating the curricula, the core curricula. As the chief just said, financial literacy should be one of the things we are exposing the children to. Digital literacy. The World Economic Forum talked about the fact that all the jobs of the future are going to be led by technology. So therefore, we have to teach our children digital literacy. If you want to pump gas now, you must understand digital literacy. If you want to be a cashier at a supermarket, you have to understand digital literacy. So we are updating the core curriculum with areas like that. But we are also going to have a wide range of other areas that these children are exposed to. Because one of the things that has to happen is that they have to have exposure to areas so that they will know what it is they like, what they can do well, so that when they move to the next level, they have had exposure. Coding, robotics, virtual reality, and emerging technologies are also going to be a critical part of the curriculum. I well remember, Prime Minister, when we were introducing EduTech, you always used to say, I don't only want the children of Barbados to be consumers of the technology, I want them to be developers of the technology. And I often comment to the chief and others that at that time, I had never heard of anything called an app. You know, if we had followed through, our Bajan children would have been the developers of a lot of those apps. We must not miss the boat this time. So therefore, we are exposing them to these areas because we want them to become innovators in the field of technology. And at the end of the Junior College of Excellence, we are going to assess the children and we are going to give them a certification that says, I completed the first 3 years of secondary education in Barbados. Now, the senior colleges of excellence will range typically from age 15 to 18. But like I said earlier for the Junior College of Excellence, if you demonstrate that you are gifted, and if you demonstrate that you have the maturity, we are not going to hold you back. These senior colleges of excellence are going to have specialist programming which is linked to national development priorities. We have listened, we have looked at the throne speeches, we have looked at speeches that have been made relative to economic development in the country. And we have identified a number of areas that have been identified as areas which we need in Barbados for the future of our development. Things like food science and agriculture, ICT and robotics, the built environment, tourism and hospitality, sports and the arts, business, entrepreneurship and design technologies, life sciences and biotechnology, science and mathematics, languages, humanities and education. And we also recognize that we must provide alternative curricula which cater to students with special educational needs who may not be able to do some of the other things that we have identified.
So what is our plan of action for a systemic change? Minister McConney spoke about the fact that there are some things that we can keep, but there are other things that we really have to analyze to see if we should keep them or throw them away. We'll be looking at system leadership. We have to make sure our education officers, senior education officers, those people who are responsible for oversight of the system are well equipped to do so. And I must say that just a few months ago, we started some training for all education officers and senior education officer and this chief education officer. And it was very exciting learning new things about education each and every time. We're looking at continuing education for education officers as well. When it comes to leadership and governance, we want to upskill our boards of management. There must be a comprehensive audit of the courses that are offered at Urdiston Teachers Training College. I remember when we had our consultations, there was much discussion about the offerings. Generally, they said that the offerings were good, but they said that there needs to be some kind of expansion with regard to making sure that all teachers and leaders are well-rounded, are on the cutting edge when it comes to education.
And one of the reasons why they recommended that we have expansion of the programming was so that people could have a whole suite of courses available to them in an online format, that they could get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and do a course and not have to go to Urdiston and sit down in a workshop and do it, because some of them may have issues that prevent them from doing that.
And we're also forging collaborations between Urdiston Teachers Training College and other accredited universities so that teachers, when they graduate from a program or from a course, they have a certificate that represents Urdiston Teachers Training College in conjunction with the best university in the world. Yeah. When it comes to other systemic changes, we want to make sure that we have an evidence-based framework. We are not going to be in the business of saying, we're making this decision because I feel or I think. Evidence will guide our every action or every decision. One of the bugbears is that it is said that the communication from the ministry needs to be improved. And we have begun to look into that. That's fine. You can clap for that. That's fine. We're working on it. That's why we're consulting and coming together and sharing so we could fix the things together. Right? So I can tell you, we have made steps in that direction, P.S. Odell, and we are having now a communication specialist that can go out there and communicate with the public. School inspections have to be the order of the day. And we also have to be willing to outsource operations where necessary, because the Ministry of Education just can't do it all. When it comes to planning, we are going to place emphasis on school improvement planning. Our principals need to be held accountable, not only in terms of keeping the physical infrastructure in shape, but in terms, especially, of ensuring that students learn. The reason that we have schools is so students can learn. So that should take precedence. Student voice. We need to allow students to have a greater voice. We have student councils right now across almost all of our secondary schools. They've either been formed or they are now forming. But the students recognize that they must have a voice in policy as well. I must say that from the Student Council, the National Student Council Executive, we received a 9-point plan for education transformation in Barbados from our students. Very interesting points they've put forward. We will also have professional development on a continuous basis, improved efficiency, operational guidelines, and updated legislation. When it comes to communities of practice, my principals know this. There is a need for you to come together and share best practices so that we can all grow together.
Now, we also propose some other initiatives. We want to build capacity at Urdiston Teachers Training College because we recognize that if we are going to do a broad set of retraining, then Urdiston has to have the capacity to do it. If I may share with you one of the failings, I think, of EduTech 2000 was that we had Urdiston address the needs of the people in the schools, but we did not address the needs of the persons at Urdiston, and so at some points, they were not competent to do it. They have to be competent to do it, so whatever professional development we do, we have to include them because they must lead these efforts. We also recognize that the issues of teachers are not dealt with as speedily as they should be dealt with because education has to stand in line for the Public Service Commission. So therefore, all of the legislative hurdles for the Teaching Service Commission, those hurdles have been passed. It is just a matter now for us to develop the framework that says how we are going to introduce the Teaching Service Commission, and that is something that we plan to do with haste. We also recognize that we must have parental education programs, and the chief spoke about the plan from the National Student Council, and I should tell the chief it is now a 10-point plan because they have added a policy on artificial intelligence.
Wow.
But they recognize that they are the closest people to parents and that they have to lead in helping us to put these parental education programs in place. So we look forward to working with the National Student Council to address the issues of parents. And we recognize that partnerships must be developed. Partnerships in which we get not only finance, but in which we get technical support and so on, because the government cannot do it on its own. Now, we have set a governance structure in place for the transformation program. That structure is going to be led by an Education Transformation Oversight Committee. The Prime Minister is going to lead that. But it is also going to have 2 deputies, one from the governing party and one from the opposition. So we are not choosing sides. We are not being partisan. This is about the children of Barbados. There is also a Transformation Working Group Committee. That committee is led by the Minister of Education, and this is where we deal with the nuts and bolts things. We have been meeting now every Wednesday morning for the last couple of weeks to address the issues that come up on a day-to-day basis. There is also going to be a National Student Advisory Committee because we told you the children must have a voice, and they're going to have a voice in this process through that committee. And there is also going to be a Public Education Quality and Equity Committee, which is going to be charged with making sure that we treat all schools equitably. That we are not saying we are going to have equity and then we give in one school more than we give in another school that needs it more. And we recognize the critical importance of having the ordinary citizens' voices, and therefore there is going to be a Citizens Advisory Committee. We also recognize that at the operational level, we need to have support from committees as well. And therefore, we have set up 8 operational committees that are looking at various areas even as we speak. There is one that is looking at the
Audit and redeployment of teachers.
Audit, training, and redeployment of teachers. There's another one that is looking at an audit of the physical and materials resources. There's one that is looking at curriculum, another one looking at assessment, another one looking at transition. There is one on legislation. There is one on leadership, and there is one on marketing and communications. So we have oversight as well as operational committees because we recognize that as we get into the process fully, we are not going to be able to do it on our own.
Thank you, Dr. Denny. So as you can see, we're on a journey. We are not there as yet. We've started. And we will have to engage in even more consultations. So you will see on the screen the roadmap. We started with our consultations in May, and we will continue up until October, that's this month, with a view to getting more input for the proposal that we will have to make to Cabinet. For the proposal that we will have to make to Cabinet. I have to make sure that you hear the word proposal because it is not a fait accompli. We've begun training of our education officers and our principals. We will continue that training, that professional development training. We will engage in further public consultations. We're going to have 13 public consultations between now and November, to give the public an opportunity to feedback on what we have proposed here. We are hoping to have some kind of approval by January 2025. 2024. Sorry, January 2024. Now, I want you to understand that there are some things that we are putting forward that we don't have to wait until 2024 or 2025 to implement. Our teachers need to be trained. Our education officers need to be trained. Schools need to be upgraded. The legislation needs to be updated. So there are certain things that we will begin before 2024 and coming on to 2025. However, in terms of the policy that we may get approval for in January, we are proposing that implementation begins September 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we are on a journey. We want you to journey with us. We can't do this without you. It is a case of putting all hands on deck. Why? Because we need to focus on creating this bright future for every child. Thank you.